you're a regular part of our church here, Lakeview Heights Baptist, then you might recognize this room I'm in today. And if you don't, that's okay. It's set up a little differently than it was when you probably saw it last. See, right now it's set up for how we've been doing services in the last number of months. Well, really, since March of 2020, it's looked like this, right? A lot less chairs. Now there's cameras around. And you know what? When you come back next time, it'll probably look even a little bit different yet. But, so if you don't recognize it, hey, you know what? Don't worry about it. It's okay. This is the room in the church that we often refer to as the sanctuary. Sometimes other different churches, they'll call their room like this. They'll call it just an auditorium. It's a room, a large room, where by and large the whole of the church, or a large percentage of it, can gather all at once together. And what do? Well, we worship God, which looks like singing and bringing offerings, and people will listen to teaching, and we will spend time in prayer. And we'll kind of do those acts of worship that are part of church life. So this room, this sanctuary in our church, it can seat about 268 people. In fact, that's what the thing on the back, the plaque, no, it's not a plaque, it's like a certificate, that's the word I'm looking for. The certificate on the wall that the fire department gave us says that we could seat 268 people in here. That's a pretty nice sized crowd. Now, maybe you've been to some larger venues than that. Maybe the church you normally go to is larger than that. But maybe like you've been to a hockey game over at Prospera Place in town, right? Do you know that facility? It's nice. I've been there. I've been to a hockey game there. It's pretty big, right? They can seat like, what is it? 6,000 like 6,800 people, something like that. Yeah, 6,886 people can all sit in there watching a hockey game. That's an even bigger crowd, yeah. Or a couple times I've been to BC Place in Vancouver to watch a football game. That place is massive. It's so incredible there. And there, what can they seat there? They can seat like 54,500 people. So that website says. 54,500 people. That's like, like 5 of the towns I grew up in? Like 5 times the size of my hometown? Or like, 1.46 West Kelownas, if you're into the math? Right? That's a huge crowd of people, actually, but yet it's still not the largest venue in the world for housing people. No, that, so I've read, is a stadium in North Korea. According to what I was reading today, there's a stadium in North Korea that can seat 150,000 people. 150,000 people. Like, that's an incredibly huge crowd. Could you imagine? 150,000 people, and the game ends, and everybody tries to leave at once? It'd be a nightmare. Anyways, you might be wondering, why are we talking about arenas and crowd sizes and all of that? Well, today we're continuing our look at the Israelites' wilderness journey, or really their first main stop of their wilderness journey, right? They're leaving slavery in Egypt, and they're on their way to freedom and a new life in the land of Canaan, the promised land. And they get to Mount Sinai. Right? We already talked in previous videos here about how Moses went up the mountain and he got the 10 Commandments. And we talked about the law and why they needed a law. I also mentioned earlier that the crowd size, think about this, the crowd size of the Israelites was 600,000 men plus women and children. So we kind of did a real rough guesstimation a few weeks back. That might be like 1.2 million people. That's a massively huge crowd, right? You got to think about if there was one building big enough for all of those people to fit, there isn't one on the planet. Okay? There is not a meeting place on the planet where everyone could gather together indoors. So, what we're going to look at today is I want to help us get a little perspective on the meeting place that God provided for them. So when God was meeting with Moses, yes, Moses received the law. He got the instructions of what to do, the rules to follow, the things they should avoid, basically the identity markers of what they'll be like as the people of God. But also he received instructions for building a place where they would meet with God. So let's go there. Hey, why don't you come along with me? Let's go outside, because this room in here, it's just not big enough. The tabernacle was the name given to the tent that Moses that he set up as the worship place for God in the desert, measuring in at about 46 meters long and 23 meters wide this way. We have the perimeter of the outer courtyard of the tabernacle. Now, inside of the outer courtyard, there was, right over there as I've marked out with the smaller box of cones in the middle, if you can see that, there was a smaller tent. A tent within a tent, a two-room tent. And the larger of the two rooms was called the holy place. And in there, there was some special items as well. There was a lampstand. There was an incense altar. There was a table that they put bread on. All of these were items to be used in worshiping God. All of them really helped remind the Israelites in one way or another of God's presence, of his provision, and of the care that he had been showing to them out in the wilderness. Now that inner tent then was about, the holy place, about 9 meters long and 4.5 deep. And then attached to it, that you kind of would pass through that to get to an inner tent, a box that was 9 by 9 meters. That was the most holy place, or the Holy of Holies. I know, great naming, right? And in that sat the Ark of the Covenant. It was this box that God had given intricate design directions to Moses on how to make. And that would hold the stone tablets that had the 10 Commandments on it. And really, it was designed like this seat, like this throne that was there as if God himself would sit upon it and meet with the Israelites in that place. And so we had there inside the inner tent, the holy place and the most holy place, the outer courtyard. The entrance to it would be at that far end of the field down there. All right, on that end there was the entranceway. And as people would enter, the first thing that would be, actually, you know what? The people didn't so much enter as much as the priests entered. And the priests would go in, and when the door would open, there would be the altar, where people would bring offerings, sacrifices for Aaron and the other priests to sacrifice to God. And so at that end, they'd come in, and there would be the altar standing mighty to greet them. The symbol that, hey, the people couldn't just walk in freely. They had to come with a sacrifice that would help them get right with God. The other side of that, between the altar and the entrance to the holy place, was a basin for washing. A way for the priests and Levites to purify themselves before they would ever offer sacrifices on behalf of the people. So, if you're, and all of these, I gotta say, all these measurements are a little bit approximate. This is the challenging thing. If you read through Exodus, and a lot of this comes out of Exodus 26, and there, God gives a different way of measuring things to Moses. He uses the word cubit, which is not a system that you or I use these days, right? But a cubit went like this. You would measure from the elbow, most commonly. Sometimes some cubits measure to here, some to here, but most would measure to here. So right away you're like, that's not a scientific measurement. You don't just go here, sometimes here, sometimes here, sometimes here. That doesn't work. You take that to a science lab, they're gonna be like, no, we can't use this data. Plus, here's the other thing. We don't know how long Moses' cubit was. God said 10 of these. Well, I measured mine today and it came in at just under 50 centimeters. So you think, that's half a meter. So we kind of get about 2 cubits to a meter. But Okay, but how long was Moses' cubit? Was it the same? Was it a little shorter? Did he have these long, gangly arms and his would be like way longer? Or was it? We don't know. Okay, we just don't know. But we have a measurement in cubits. We've kind of tried to help you see by converting it to meters for you today, to help you kind of understand this area that I've mapped out, right? The 46 by 23 meters area. Well, it's like this whole lower field, all right? It's pretty much filled the whole thing. By comparison, it would be like 2 or 3 of our sanctuaries. But here, right? All of that for a group that was, what, 1.2 million-ish people? There's no way they could all come in, even if that's the way worship worked then. Even if they all, but no, what did they do? They gathered around the outside. They knew just it being in their midst was enough, because they knew that God's presence was there in that place. So it's full of symbols, a reminder that God is in this place. It says in the scripture that after they had set it all up, God's Spirit was seen filling the tabernacle. The cloud, the smoke that was on the mountain that hid Moses then filled within the tent. So it wasn't so much about the people coming together. They were already together. It was about them being reminded very physically that God was in the middle of their camp. God wasn't just out there somewhere. God wasn't up in heaven. God was with them in that place. And so that's part of why it was. Now, there's a biblical concept I want to share with you real quickly to help us kind of wrap our head around why God did it this way. And the word is accommodation. And when we talk about that, what it really means is God who is infinite, God who is not limited, God who is everywhere and all at once, he references himself. He interacts with people like you and me in ways that we're capable of comprehending. It's like, I don't know if you've ever sat in a class and a teacher or someone really smart, and you just know they're really smart because they're talking about stuff and you don't get it. It goes way over your head. Well, God doesn't do that with us. He uses things that we understand. So even just that whole measurement thing with the cubit, that's how people in Moses' day did it. So what did God do? God gave them directions in ways they would understand. The people understood that you would go to a location to worship God. So God would meet them in a location so that the people could worship God. So God does this. He accommodates us and our limitations so that we can know Him. It's an incredible thing, an incredible gift that He does for us. And so, the tabernacle, this big tent, imagine this, 6.5 feet walls all around, 2-meter walls all around. And what do we have? Then something portable, so that wherever Israel went, they could set up a spot where God would be. And a spot where they could come to God and seek forgiveness. And seek forgiveness from Him. So, and where God's presence would be in the midst of their camp. Now you might be thinking, well, what about today, right? How does this interact with churches today? What do we do with this information? Because we haven't built tabernacles like this. We didn't follow Moses' directions that he got from God, and we didn't, you won't go into a church and find it just this shape. No, we don't have to go to we look at our church, and our church is just like right across the street here. And when I look at that, we know that that's a place where we as Christians, we go and we worship God. And that often looks like music and, giving offerings, and we'll see other people there, and we'll grow in what we call fellowship, and we'll listen to teaching, and we do all this stuff that goes on at a church building. But we don't have to go there to meet God. God, yes, is there, but God's also here in this field. In fact, a lot of the times when I feel most free to worship God, for me personally, it's often out on the ocean or up at a mountain or all sorts of places. And it's not that that doesn't happen inside that church building. It happens there too. But the beautiful thing is that we live in a way with God that His Spirit is inside of us. Right? That's what happened in Acts when right after Jesus ascended, the Spirit of God came in and filled His people. And if you are a follower of Jesus, if you're trusting Him with your life, God's Spirit is within you. It's not in a tent, and it's not in a building, it's inside people. And so we come together and we celebrate God and we worship God, and we are filled with His Spirit. So we don't have to go to a place. But don't hear me wrong here. The Bible's also really clear that as Christians, we should get together with other Christians. We should have gatherings, and that's a fine place. That when I'm pointing out our church building. It's a fine place to do it. It's a lovely facility to do it in. It really makes it easy for us to gather there. And that's great. But as you know, we can do that here out in a field. We can do it at the beach. We can do it up a mountain. We can do it all sorts of places, because God is not limited. We've come to understand that with His Spirit in us, He's not limited just to meeting us in a certain place. Right? So, in Moses' day, people needed to know that God was present. They needed to see the tent. They needed to see the smoke and the cloud within it. And then they would be assured that going forward that He was with them. We thankfully, because of God's Spirit in us, don't have that same need. The reality is, the whole earth is the Lord's. Every bit of it is His, and it is filled with His glory. God is here, God is there, wherever you are today. God is everywhere, right? God is in there, God is out here, God is in here. God is with you, God is for you, God is in you. And now, in light of all that, all right, may we go forth and love the Lord our God with all of our heart, with all of our soul, with all of our mind, with all of our strength, and may we love our neighbor as ourselves. Guys, blessings on you. Have a great week.